What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today, of course, talking some more NFL draft. I just noticed that we don't have the right background on. Alex, if you could go ahead and put the right background graphics on here. But today, we're, of course, talking some more about the NFL draft and the new report today that we want to discuss. Giants are looking to throw a dart. Yeah, they're looking at Jackson Dart quietly. They've done a ton of research on the Ole Miss quarterback, who I know a lot of you really like, as we've discussed over the course of the last several live streams. So we're going to talk about that, and also the rumor that the Giants are still banging on the door to get to the number one overall pick from the Tennessee Titans. So those are the two topics we want to primarily focus in on. Not talking about the Yankees versus the Tampa Bay Rays, but we've got other conversations to have as well with the live chat. So Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? A little early stream today. Happy to be here, joined by you and talking some more New York Giants.
Absolutely. Yeah. Early stream, Saturday, 11 a.m. People still getting out of bed after a long Friday night, and they throw on FSG and enjoy a little hour-long session, most likely around then, as usual, been going around an hour these days. Regarding Jackson Dart and kind of a couple things that happened yesterday, obviously they had the Colorado Pro Day, and we saw Travis Hunter run some routes. And I thought it was interesting because Hunter wasn't supposed to participate in the pro day. He wasn't supposed to work out or run any routes. He ended up just doing it anyway. And he did it without any gloves on. And he was catching everything and, looks obviously fast and agile and everything. Really, really good player. And, a lot of people are now coming around. A lot of the analysts and a lot of the people in the NFL Network and whatnot are saying, if Travis Hunter's there, even at 2 for the Browns, they should take him. If he's there at 3 for the Giants, they should take him. And it's kind of the consensus now among many people. And I think it's certainly interesting. He obviously, and I don't like how people will say like he has to play one position, he has to do this. I get it, I understand why, but I don't want to limit the kid. I want him to try and be the best he can possibly be, whether that be playing one spot or both, or sprinkling in corner or receiver in his game. You draft a player like this and you say, where can we use him? He can play two different positions. Where is the best place for us to maximize that talent? So interesting from the Colorado Pro Day. Obviously, we'll just start there and then we'll kind of materialize into Jackson Dart, because I think that, there is some interesting information coming out about him right now too.
Yeah, for sure. Before we start with that Colorado Pro Day, I want to just give a shout out to everybody in the chat. Cam Simpson was the first one in here with that great photograph of Cameron, John, and myself in front of the Epcot ball. Hello there, he says, sounding like Obi-Wan Kenobi today, Cameron. Appreciate you being here. Jason's here, says good morning. Good morning to you, Jason. Daniel's here. Let's go Giants. We've got some other folks in here. Elias is in here. Mr. President is in here. Cameron Simpson saying Hunter and Dart all the way, which is something we're going to discuss. Of course, Paul's saying, what's up, Paul? And Daniel, Hunter, everybody in here. Appreciate you all tuning in on the live chat. And we've got a comment from Twitter, RF, saying, yeah, play him at both with no injury clause. So we'll go ahead and talk about that as well. But Alex, here's the first thing that I want to bring up as the takeaway from the Colorado Pro Day. And it's not actually Giants related. This is a big deal to me. The more that I've sat here and I've thought about it, the Cleveland Browns owner was at that pro day. That feels like the biggest piece of news that people are not talking about enough. Go ahead, Alex, look at the depth chart for the Cleveland Browns. Do you know who their quarterbacks are? Have you taken a look at their quarterback room? It's Deshaun Watson, who's going to be out for the year because he just ruptured his Achilles twice, and Kenny Pickett. They traded away Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They do not have another quarterback on this roster. So unless between now and the NFL draft they land Kirk Cousins somehow, which doesn't seem entirely likely, how do they not take a quarterback at number 2 overall? Like, how is this not the owner going to the pro day in order to meet Shedeur Sanders, convince Dion to let his son play in Cleveland, and take him at number 2 overall? That is now my new working theory. I know that a lot of Giants fans want Shedeur at 3. I don't blame you. He's a good prospect. Maybe not Alex and I's preference, but I wouldn't be mad at him with the number 3 overall pick. I understand Shedeur is exciting to Giants fans, but will he even be there? This is why it was so crucial that the Giants picked up 2 quarterbacks in free agency. They got a great backup in Jameis, and they got a starting quarterback in Russell Wilson to protect themselves from the situation where they're picking at 3 and the quarterback that they wanted is not on the board. Totally possible to me. So I'll give a shout out here to Charles for the super chat. Thank you, because I do think it ties into this conversation. Seems like the Browns will take Travis ahead of us. That seems to be what most people think, but I'm actually taking a different thought process here. The owner being at that pro day, the fact that they don't have a quarterback, it indicates to me that they're leaning towards Shedeur Sanders. I might be alone on the island and thinking that way, but that's how I'm feeling, Alex. I do want to get your take on that.
It's really interesting because why would you send an owner to go see a Travis Hunter? You know what I mean? Like your GM can do that. Your head coach can do that. They can clearly see Travis Hunter on the football field. Obviously, great kid and has a ton of talent. But Sanders is the face of your franchise. Hunter's just a piece of the puzzle. The quarterback's always going to be the face. So why would you send your owner to scout the Colorado players if you're not considering drafting a quarterback that could be the face of your franchise? And let's be quite honest, Anthony, he's going to start immediately there. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody else to play over Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. There is nobody else. Deshaun Watson re-ruptured his Achilles. He's done. He's cooked. He's basically might never play again for that team. Wouldn't be surprised.
Well,
so I wouldn't.
Yeah, on that point, to add context to this, it was the owner just last week who said we took a swing and we missed with Deshaun Watson. That's a man who wants to get rid of that quarterback and find a new one. This sounds like an owner who's at Colorado to go get a quarterback.
Absolutely. The only reason they can't cut him is because he's owed so much money. Otherwise, he would not be on this team anymore or on that team anymore. So I do think, the Browns are absolutely looking at Sanders and saying, can he be the face of our franchise? Is he the right player? Now, the pro day, of course, is all simulated. It's all really not much. And he made some really nice throws. There's a couple of drops, completed a lot of passes, but no one's really keeping track of completion percentage in a pro day kind of environment. But it was really good to see him, dapping up his buddies and saying hi to the coaches, and all these things are obviously very good for just the teams and organizations to link up with these individual players. So I do, and also, Sanders did say they got me nice and full. They said he got me nice and full. Like they went out to dinner. Hunter was also there, I believe, too. Lots of stuff going on in terms of the Browns doing their due diligence on these players. So it's very clear to me that they are absolutely in the running here for Sanders. And if they take him at 2, and you're the Giants and you have the choice of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, I mean, it's really up to you at that point. Like everyone here has a different opinion. Some people want Carter, some people want Hunter. You really just can't go wrong. I'm happy with either of those two guys. One of those guys builds you an identity in the trenches. The other guy can be one of the most dynamic receivers in the league alongside Malik Neighbors. And there's nothing better. And I'll say with this, I bring up the Philadelphia again because it just is good for this example. They got 2 elite receivers in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and then dropped Jalen Hurts into a perfect scenario. You increase the chances of a young quarterback that may not be a top first-round pick, and you greatly enhance the chances of a first-round pick in the future panning out with that type of playmaking, that type of firepower on offense. So if the Giants, that leads us to Jackson Dart now. If Jackson Dart slides to the mid-20s and you trade up to get that 5th-year option, you trade up to – I know the Broncos are a team that a lot of people are looking at. I do think it's not out of the realm of possibility the Giants could trade up in the 1st round to get Jackson Dart. And if he slides, I wouldn't be surprised. You take him, you sit him for a year. He's 21 years old. He's the perfect candidate to sit there and learn and soak up as much information as possible. And then take over that job with 2 elite playmakers at receiver. And you have your draft capital next year. You have your 1st-round pick. Maybe you don't have a second, but you have your 1st-round pick next year. So whatever position you're you could just go BPA next year, and that could turn the page. Now you have a young quarterback, plenty of firepower, a good defense, draft capital, and a ton of money because rookie contracts at 2 critical wide receiver positions and rookie contract at quarterback. You have so much money, so much capital and resources to build around. So that is something I'm considering here. Now we know the Steelers, the Browns, and the Saints have done the most research along with the Giants on Jackson Dart. Those are the teams to be concerned about. Anthony, looking at the situation right now, do you think that he will slide to the 20s, or do you think that he might get picked in the top 15?
I do not think Jackson Dart is getting picked in the top 15. I do not think he's that caliber of prospect, and I really highly doubt that the NFL views him as a top 15 pick. I mean, realistically, guys, we are talking about a player that's probably going on day 2 of the draft. I know that the reason why we think he might go in round 1 and why the Giants might trade up for him, that's just because of supply and demand, right? There's more demand for quarterbacks than there ever is supply every single year. So as a result, you see guys who are projected late 1st or day 2 picks go in the 1st round. And the other reason being, a team might want to trade up into the first round to get a fifth-year option on Jackson Dart. That's absolutely possible. But I really don't think that this is going to be as competitive as a market as people think it is, especially if the Browns end up taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall. That's really their competition there at the top of the second round. Those teams trying to trade up into the first, because the Titans are going to take Cam Ward. So of those teams picking inside the top 3 picks in the second round, the Browns would be the other quarterback needy team. But if they take a quarterback in round 1, the Giants are no longer competing with them to get Jackson Dart. But then again, this is the other part of this, and this is where I want to bring in this new idea for you, Alex, and get your take on it. I was talking about this yesterday on the Bleacher Report live stream. Cameron Simpson was there for sure, so I know he remembers this. But let's say that the Giants are feeling like it is going to be competitive, and they want to prepare themselves for the possibility of trading up into the first round, getting a second first-round pick for either Jackson Dart or, I think Shedeur might go top 3. If he doesn't, and he slides, as we've talked about before, the Giants could set themselves up to be prepared for that by doing the following, Alex. Last year, as we discussed, the Minnesota Vikings, weeks in advance of the NFL draft, traded up for a second first-round pick. I think the New York Giants should do the exact same thing. And let me explain. The cost of doing so, yes, is a future second-round pick. However, getting those 2 first-round picks, first of all, you're getting 2 cost-controlled players on rookie contracts, which I know you think is really important, and so do I, with the fifth-year options, which is crucial. And second of all, you have your number 3 overall pick, and you can go either way, quarterback or best player available. Great. And then with that second first-round pick, now you've got so many options. What if, Alex, the Titans say, actually, you know what? We are willing to trade down, but give us 2 first-round picks. Now you have 2 first-round picks. You have the ammo to give it to them right then and there and give them 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. You might be able to get that deal done then. Okay. Or if you're picking number 3, let's say you take Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick, and Shedeur Sanders starts to slide into those mid-first round areas. Now you've got that second first-round pick. Trade up, you can go get him. A much easier and much cheaper cost of trading up from the 20s to the mid-10s than it would be from later on. Or even if it's Jackson Dart with that second first-round pick, you might stick and pick and get him there. And at the worst-case scenario, Alex, you're getting a BPA at 3 and a BPA in the mid-20s if you trade up for that second first-round pick. So you're getting 2 instant impact starters for your team, a team coming off of a 3-14 season that needs to win games this upcoming season. So my take is that the Giants should do what the Vikings did, prepare themselves for every situation, and get a second first-round pick now. Because if we're going to be talking about potentially any of these quarterbacks sliding into the mid-first or the late first, and the Giants maybe taking a quarterback there, I don't want them to trade up on draft night and pay a premium out of desperation on draft night. I'd rather them situate themselves right now to have a second first-round pick and have all of the flexibility to make these moves on draft night. And on top of that, Alex, let's say the guy that they wanted with that second first-round pick ends up not being there, then they can trade down and recuperate the majority of what they lost by trading up. So I think now is the time to get that second first-round pick if they're going to get it at all. What's your take on that?
Certainly an interesting opinion and strategy for the Giants. But my only concern is that I don't think this draft class is worth doing it for, because if you miss out on one of those guys, or you miss out on Dart in this instance, the options are just, I mean, they're obviously first round players because they're going to be in the first round, but not necessarily first round grades. Last year was such a stacked class that I think they executed that move, and they were like, most of these guys have first round grades. Like, it was one of the best draft classes we've ever seen in the first round in the history of the draft, the impact that these guys had. So like last year I was like, yeah, like that would have made sense because of how strong the class was. This year, I'm just not as convinced that it's worthwhile to do it, just because I don't have that much conviction in this draft class. And, taking the chance at Dart, I do think like the risk of him being there or not, it certainly is intriguing, but I think I might honestly rather save that second round pick next year, because if we do need a quarterback next year and we want to trade up, that second round pick may be extremely valuable, so that's my only fear, is like it's a risk to do it too early, because we might not get him, and then next year we don't have a second round pick, and we may want that to trade up for our first round quarterback.
That's a really fair counterpoint. In fact, I think that's the best counterpoint if you're looking ahead to next year's draft capital and looking ahead to the potential need for a quarterback next year. I think in this situation, if you're getting the second first round pick, the idea is similar to what the Minnesota Vikings had last year. You would like to land a quarterback with one of your 2 first round picks. However, again, in the worst case scenario, Alex, let's say that second pick is like pick 20 or 25, somewhere in that range. And at number 3, if you do get Shedeur and he's your future franchise quarterback, well, now that number 20 to 25 pick, that might be that dominant defensive tackle that we've been yearning for, right? Like you might get a first round defensive tackle. We've been talking about taking a defensive tackle at pick number 34, right? And we might get a really good player there. But you got a mid first round pick. The instant impact defensive tackle that you get might be a really solid player, plus fifth year option on him. So I think that there's a lot of ways that you could slice it. It's never a bad thing to have multiple first round picks, in my opinion, especially because look, with the Minnesota Vikings last year, they thought they were going to be taking JJ McCarthy with that second first round pick. Ultimately, the boards moved. They had to take him with the 10th overall selection. They still landed a starting offensive tackle with that second first round pick. So the worst case, if the Giants are looking at it like, hey, maybe with that second first round pick, we can get Dart. And then on draft night, they're like, let's not take the chance. Let's take Shedeur Sanders here at number 3. And then with that second first round pick, they're still getting an immediate impact starter. So I really like the idea. I would probably be willing to sacrifice that future second round pick. It's a tough sell, of course, because as you said, you might want to use that to package up and get a quarterback next year. Absolutely. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of value to having a pair of first round picks in this year's draft class, because I know it's not the draft class that it was last year. Last year was an anomaly. That thing was so stacked, but I still think there is a lot of talent to take advantage of in the first round of this year's class. So I would be curious to see if they make a move like that.
For sure. I mean, yeah, having multiple first round picks is always a good thing. But may I remind you, the last time we had multiple first round picks and what happened? We had the 5th and the 8th pick. And obviously went with Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. And that didn't work out so well for us. And that was a much stronger draft class. So, it depends on who you're picking, obviously.
Do you remember the time before that when the Giants had 2 first round picks?
Who was it?
2019.
I was going to say, was it Andrew Thomas? No,
Daniel Jones and Dexter Lawrence. And
one of them ruined 6 years of my life.
Well, let me kind of throw this out there though. With my logic here, it kind of matches that, because in that year's draft class, they added that extra first round pick, the 17th overall pick, where they took Dexter Lawrence. That's where they initially planned on taking Daniel Jones. The idea was to take Josh Allen Hines, I think is now his new last name, Josh Allen Hines at number 6. The draft boards moved. They heard that the Commanders picking 15 wanted Daniel Jones. So they said, okay, now we have to take Jones at 6, and we'll take the best player available at 17, which ended up being an all-pro in Dexter Lawrence. However, imagine that if they took Josh Allen Hines at 6, Josh Hines Allen, that's what it is. I knew I was messing it up. I was like, it doesn't sound right. But imagine they took the pass rusher at 6, and then they got Daniel Jones at 17. That's how it could have shaken out. Again, that's what the Vikings were hoping for. I don't know. I do think that there's benefit. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, but you also need to win games and get an instant impact player, like the Vikings last year, like the Giants in 2019, I think there's a lot of benefits to gaining that second first round pick.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, you can never go wrong with having extra picks. The only way it can go wrong is if you miss on the players, which is obviously really dependent on the scouting. And last year we saw really good scouting. But Anthony, I want to bring up something that I heard this morning, and I texted you about it. And I want to get your take on it, and guys in the chat, I want to get your take on it as well. There's reports coming out, right? And I know I think Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News reported it. So whether or not you believe him or not, it's up to you. But I'll just tell you what he said. He said that both Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen have been working as individual entities more than ever before. So in the past, we've seen those two guys attached to the hip. They would go to the pro days together. They go to the private workouts together. They go to the draft and the combine. Everything was together. Now they're doing things a lot more separately, right? Daboll's doing a lot more scouting on his own. He's not going to as many pro days this year. I know he went to Colorado's yesterday. Joe Schoen's doing a lot more of the individual stuff. And Daboll's doing his own thing as well, kind of getting the players in order and managing the actual players themselves instead of the roster as a whole. I think that's how it's supposed to be, Anthony. I think that the general manager and head coach should not be tied to the hip. I think that they have to have really good collaboration, of course, and really amazing communication, but their decision-making, like, you can't do both jobs at once. They are hired to do individual jobs for a reason, because they're really difficult to do. They're really difficult to do at a high level. They need to have good collaboration, good communication, but they also need to be able to do their individual stuff without it being like a little boys club. You know what I mean? So I think Joe Schoen needs to go and manage his job and manage this roster and build this team and do all the research and do everything. And Daboll doesn't have all the information. Like you say, Anthony, it's unusual for head coaches to be that along in the scouting process until the combine, until the draft gets closer. These head coaches need to be doing other things, right? They only really get involved here later on. So the general manager is the most important part in gathering all this information for the draft and roster building and contracts and free agency. And the head coach is really about building the internal aspect of that team, the internal foundation with the players currently on the roster, not the players that aren't on the team yet. So I know that he does a lot of work, obviously scouting Russell Wilson, watching all of his throws. And, we obviously know they wanted Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, which didn't pan out. But, what is your opinion on this? The fact that they're working as separate entities more than ever before. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think it doesn't matter? I think it's better for the objectivity of everybody. Like, I think everyone can have their objective opinion and throw their 2 cents in instead of it just being kind of like this collaborative effort with just Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. And I think they made a lot of decisions between those 2 guys, and a lot of like weird things happened, like Wink Martindale situation, the Wilkins brothers, like coaches kind of went off the wagon at some points. I think they kind of shook things up a little bit this offseason to get things in order and create more of a hierarchy.
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting, and I think that there's a couple of takeaways that you can have from it, depending on, first of all, how cynical you are. Because if you look at it from the perspective of these 2 are now working as individuals, where they used to be completely collaborative. All right, is there any beef? Like, that's obviously the big question that you're going to have. Is there beef between Joe Schoen and Brian Dable? Is there tension between the 2 of them? Or are they just trying to restructure the hierarchy of the organization? It could be one of 2 things. In fact, I actually think it's the latter. I think it's probably John Mara stepping in after last season and saying, we need to rework the hierarchy. Clearly, what we've been doing hasn't been working, and we need to make some sort of serious tonal shift here. And I think that's probably what's happening. But I think that Schoen and Dable are still probably collaborative. We saw Hard Knocks last year. I thought there was a couple of moments, like you're saying, Alex, where how about those scenes where they were playing Beyonce so that the HBO cameras couldn't pick up what they were saying, even though they still could pick up what they were saying? But that was just a room with Brian Dable and Joe Schoen. There were no other decision makers in there. There was no Brandon Brown. There was no Tim McDonald. There was no Mike Kafka, no Shane Bowen. They did not have anyone in that room other than Schoen and Dable. So I think that now, this offseason, there's got to be more people in the room. There's got to be more people taking a look at this roster, analyzing it, and making decisions on the direction of this team rather than just 2 people. And I know they're the 2 most important people, absolutely, but it's always important to collect as much information as possible and get as many opinions as possible. But what I will say is this. From what we know, the Dable picks, right, like the guys that Brian Dable wanted in the draft, all panned out. He really wanted Jaden Daniels, and he panned out. He really wanted Drake May, and he looks like he's got a lot of star potential for the Patriots. And the way that it all looked, Malik Neighbors was a Brian Dable guy. That's who Dable wanted in this year's draft. And if it wasn't Malik Neighbors, if you remember in Hard Knocks, it was Brock Bowers that Brian Dable wanted. Brock Bowers had the greatest rookie tight end season of all time last year. So I don't know if they're truly trying to become independent of one another. And Shane's just making all these decisions and maybe not taking as much of a stock in Dable's opinion. I don't know if that's the right way to go, because I think Dable's a really smart guy, and I think he knows his shit, and he's a great football mind. And I think it was evidence in Hard Knocks last year that he's not so bad at scouting some collegiate talents himself, and he knows which selections would be best for the New York Giants, at least in the first round of the draft. So I hope that Dable is involved in this process and that he's not being completely phased out of it, because as we've heard from, I think it's Bill Parcells with the great quote many years ago saying the GM, I put the grocery list together and the GM goes grocery shopping, right? That's how it's supposed to work. I hope that's the way that it is still working for the New York Giants.
And it might just be. And this is an interesting kind of situation because both these guys, their jobs are on the line. So they have to figure out, how do we work together at the most efficient capacity? That probably means separating everything. It probably means separating their responsibilities, gathering as much information as possible, and kind of learning from their mistakes. And I'll tell you one thing, Anthony, we're seeing that the Giants at least have learned from some of their mistakes. At quarterback, you mentioned it. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, they have a starter and they have a backup. That is the most critical point to make when it comes to these guys. Like, they have learned the lesson of they cannot go into the season with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock at quarterback and expect to be successful. There's no chance. They invested in the secondary. They corrected their mistake that they made with Xavier McKinney. They let him walk and they didn't pay him. They lost a key leader in their defensive, one of their best defensive backs. They went and got Javon Holland, a key leader and one of their best defensive backs. So not to mention Paulson Adebo. They've learned lessons from their mistakes. And that is the only thing that we can look at and say, all right, at least we can tell that they're not running back the same problems. In Dave Gettleman's era, we saw the same mistakes every single year. Like every single year, the decision making never changed. He never got better. He made and doubled down on the same dumb things. The Giants at least look like Joe Shane looks like he's learned from the mistakes and the problems he's made. And he said, like, there was going to be hiccups, there was going to be problems, and there certainly was. So I'm glad to see that at least they're changing the trajectory a little bit. This is definitely a good opportunity to learn. And if they can get it right, they can expedite this growth process. Like they have to make this decision. They have to make a good decision at third overall. And listen, Anthony, to kind of pivot back to our Jackson Dart discussion, why do you think he could be great? Like what do you see from him? We've watched plenty of games from him. Why do you think he could be a quality quarterback? And do you think that he would be a good option for Brian Dable's offense? Do you think he would be a good fit there?
The reason that Jackson Dart can be great is because he's a ball of clay that has yet to be molded, right? Sometimes these guys come out of college and there's two ways to look at it. Either you really like a quarterback prospect with a lot of experience because they're refined and they're not as much of a project and they can step in and make an immediate impact. Or you want a guy who's like the least refined prospect, who's just a ball of clay waiting to be molded, like Josh Allen was in 2018. There were other prospects in that draft class, Alex. If you're looking at Sam Darnold, for example, he was pretty polished. He had starting experience with USC. He played in some big games and played at a very high level. And that's why he ultimately went number 3 overall, because he proved himself with experience. But Josh Allen ended up being the best quarterback from that draft class, debatably. Lamar Jackson was in that draft class. Let me not forget that. But Josh Allen went in that draft class at number, I believe, 7 overall. He was a little bit lower down the board because he was more of a moldable ball of clay, but then he ended up becoming this MVP level player because he didn't have all of that experience already lended to him. He gained a new experience at the NFL level. So with Jackson Dart, essentially what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of knocks on him. He didn't play in a pro style offense. He basically played 7v7 football at Ole Miss. He hasn't done this. He hasn't done that. That doesn't mean he can't do those things. It just means he hasn't had the opportunity to do certain things just yet. And because he hasn't done them just yet, he doesn't have a bad or a collegiate level coach coaching him how to do certain things. He's going to get a fresh perspective from an NFL coach at the next level. So the ceiling is very high with Jackson Dart. The potential is absolutely there because he just hasn't been molded into an NFL quarterback just yet. And I think that's really crucial. He's got a lack of experience. And sometimes, Alex, a lack of experience truly is a good thing, right? Like when we saw Bo Nix coming out of college, we were like, yeah, we know what he is. Like he probably will be good as a rookie. He'll probably be a decent quarterback, but he's pretty much hit his ceiling because he's been in college for 6 freaking years playing football. Like we knew what Bo Nix was, and he was exactly what we thought he was last year with the Denver Broncos. But we didn't know exactly what some of these other prospects were going to be. Josh Allen being a great example, and so many others. So I think with Dart, for me, what the big selling point is, he has tools and traits. Like he's athletic and he's mobile. He's got plus mobility. He's got a very strong arm, one of the best in the draft class, in my opinion, and he is accurate. Now, the other things, decision-making, processing, pocket presence, no, he hasn't sharpened those skills yet. But because he has the things that you can't teach, and these are all teachable things that he doesn't have, that's why I think he's got so much potential and why I think a team is going to be really excited by him and why he might end up going in the first round and why I could absolutely see him panning out as a very high ceiling quarterback at the next level. It's all because he doesn't have experience is the biggest selling point to me for Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take. And, he's one of the best deep ball throwers in this draft class. That's kind of a consensus thought. And obviously Ward and Sanders are also great in that category as well. Dart's offense, like you said, was very limited in many ways. It was very quarterback friendly. Now is an opportunity for a team to take him and say, sit him for a year. Like Jackson Dart is the perfect candidate to sit for a whole season behind Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and just soak up as much information as possible. He's probably the best athlete of the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft class with Ward and Sanders. I think he's a better athlete than both those guys. We've seen his ability to throw on the run, which is very, very encouraging and solid. He can still hit the throws outside the numbers, and he's not afraid to take risks. And I think that's where I actually like Jackson Dart a lot is sometimes he'll bail out of the pocket. Sometimes he'll abandon the pocket too early. These are all things that can be taught out of him and things that Brian Dable has experience teaching out of a quarterback. but his gunslinging mentality, it's a mindset. You know what I mean? Like a lot of guys, some guys are just conservative by nature. Some guys are just they're rhythm throwers. They're, obviously, and I don't think that he can't do that. I think he can do rhythm play within rhythm and structure, but more so is that when it comes to the out of structure stuff, he is capable of doing ridiculous things. We've seen some unbelievable throws. So we'll see what happens there. And like people are saying in the chat right now, the Steelers really like Jackson Dart. If that's the case and they don't have a quarterback right now and we don't have Rodgers yet, they could absolutely take a player like this and they could absolutely go into the season and start him immediately. I mean, there's a couple teams here, Anthony. That's kind of why right now I'm a little bit concerned, because the Giants went out and got two of the starting caliber players. I mean, Jameis Winston's a backup, but he could start for one of those teams and it would be competent at the very least, right? The question is, the Browns don't have a quarterback and the Steelers don't have a quarterback. And the Jets, I mean, they have Justin Fields, and the reports say that they like him, but who really knows? That's the question right now. Like, do you think that there's just too many quarterback needy teams ahead of, like, right above the 20s range for these guys to slip?
No, because I think after pick 9, that 10 through 20 range, there's not a single quarterback needy team. If any of these guys get past 9, which I absolutely think Jackson Dart's going to get past 9, he's going to fall into the 20s, no doubt. I mean, look at the draft order. Let me actually pull that up and then, give you a more sound take here, because I know you mentioned the Jets. I really do not think the New York Jets are taking a quarterback.
I don't think so either.
Round. So, and the Raiders just extended Geno Smith.
Yeah.
I think that if Shedeur is on the board, they might consider taking Shedeur Sanders at number 6 because of the connection between Sanders and Brady. However, if it's not Shedeur, they're not taking Dart at 6.
Saints might.
The Saints at 9, I do not think would take Jackson Dart.
It's too early,
I understand the logic there, but I think it's too early for him. And then again, at 10, you have Chicago, 11, San Francisco, then Dallas, Miami, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Arizona, Cincinnati, Seattle, and Tampa Bay, and Denver. None of those teams are taking a quarterback. Not until you get to 21, where Pittsburgh is, will you see a quarterback potentially come off the board again. And if they do sign Aaron Rodgers, I don't think they can reasonably justify taking Jackson Dart, a second-round prospect, with the number 21st overall pick. So I really do not envision this world that a lot of people see where Jackson Dart is a top 20 pick, unless it's at 20. But 20, if a team trades up to 20, that is the absolute highest that I personally see Shedeur Sanders going, or I'm sorry, not Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart going in this year's draft class.
Yeah, I think that's valid. Looking just at the teams that need quarterbacks, this is going to be weird. And let's pivot over for a second to the second segment of this episode, is the Giants' interest in trading up to the first overall pick. Now, according to Cameron Wolf, he touched on it slightly yesterday. I know we have a super chat as well. Before, we head over to Brandon Williams and his super chat, very generous of you, by the way. Cameron Wolf of NFL.com stated that the Giants are interested and have been pounding the door or knocking on the door of the Titans to potentially move up to first overall. So we'll get to that in a second. Interesting conversation to follow. Obviously, what that would take and if it's worth taking a gamble like that.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll get to the super chat first here from Brandon Williams. Appreciate it so much. Thank you, Brandon. What's up, guys? I just want to say Dart gives me ceiling of Josh Allen. Floor to me is Jameis Winston with better athleticism. I feel getting Hunter at 3 and Dart at the back end of the first could be good. Honestly, I don't disagree with you. It seems to be a growing fan theory that that's what the Giants are going to do. Like, a lot of fans seem to prefer this option as well. Hunter at 3 and Dart later on in the first. And if that's what happens, you won't hear complaints from me. I think that Jackson Dart absolutely has a high ceiling. I don't know if he's got the Josh Allen ceiling, but he definitely has a high ceiling because he is inexperienced, and that often lends yourself to be more coachable for a guy like a Brian Dable who really wants a coachable quarterback. So I think Dart has a lot of potential. I think the floor is probably pretty low for him. Yeah, maybe Jameis Winston, but probably lower than that for me, just because Jackson Dart's offense that he played in at Ole Miss, Alex, was just so simplified. Like when we were watching the All-22 live on the channel, it was so easy for him. So we'll ultimately see where he goes and where he pans out, but I absolutely could see him going in the first round to the Giants. And I do see a very high ceiling for Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I do think, like you said, he's a multiple piece of clay. And if a team gets their hands on that clay and they're able to put him in a system with good coaching and good discipline, his upside's the sky's the limit. We don't really know what it's going to be, but he's He's not experienced enough in the right system. He does not in a NFL style offense. He needs a year. Like he needs to sit. I don't think he's a guy that can walk in and start immediately. I think he has to be a guy that you sit behind some players for a year. If he slips to the back end of the first round, dude, like I think the Giants should take him because they have the perfect setup for Jackson Dart. He's a year younger than Sanders, a year younger than Cam Ward. You let him sit, you still get the 5th-year option, and you can drop him into a situation where Neighbors and Hunter at receiver. That's pretty damn good. And imagine hitting on Dart and then having your draft capital for next year and the resources. Like you're set up for a long time. The Giants now are not a joke anymore. The Giants are like actually legitimate. And the Giants could go out next year and say, well, Kayvon didn't have depending on how Kayvon does, but let's say he has a bad year. They can go into next offseason saying our primary number one goal is to get another elite pass rusher to pair with Ryan Burns. Our number one goal is to add the top right tackle in free agency because Jermaine Illuminor will be a free agent. They can go out there and solve one of their biggest needs with the best possible free agent. And they're going to be an attractive destination because you got star players all over your offense. You have a really good defensive, unit, or at least on paper, you have good players, at least barring any injuries. I think that's a good situation to be in. So, if Dart does slide, I would be pretty excited about that. He's a very solid arm. He's got more than enough arm strength. And I do think that when you're looking at him as a pure prospect, pure player, he's a perfect guy to sit for a year. You know what I mean? And if you're going to do that, if you're going to draft a quarterback to sit for a whole year, I don't really want to do it at 3rd overall. I'd rather want to do it at 25 or 20. That's more my speed. That's just my opinion. You guys could obviously have your own, and I respect it. But I want my 3rd overall pick to probably be playing on day one and probably be making an impact, especially given the context our coaching staff needs to win today.
Yeah, and I do think there's a way to blend it. I think you can get a guy who helps you now and in the future, and I think that could be Carter, that could be Hunter. There's so many ways to slice that apple, as I always like to say. So, the number 3 overall pick, it's a crucial one for the Giants, especially for a regime that absolutely needs to win games now, but also in the future. We would like to have a bright future for sure. Brandon with another super chat here, and then we just had a buzzer beater come in. I was about to say that we are going to wrap up after the super chat. I guess not, because Jeff beat the buzzer. But
they
Brandon,
don't want us to stop,
thank you so much for this super chat. Brandon saying also, we can't keep kicking the can for next year draft to pick a quarterback. Should have got one last year. Yeah, I really don't understand the logic here for the Giants. It's been 6 years since they've drafted a quarterback. I think that's malpractice in its own right. Last year, they should have taken one, even if it wasn't in the first round, sometime between round 1 and round 7. It's inexplicable that they didn't take a quarterback and at least set themselves up to have a semblance of a future, right? Like even last year when the Saints, everything went haywire for them. Well, at least they got to put a rookie on the field and start to scout and develop Spencer Rattler at some point. And the Patriots as well. They still threw another dart at the board, and they ended up gaining positive appreciation on Joe Milton, selected him with a 6th-round pick, traded him for a 5th-round pick. So there's so much incentive to taking a quarterback in the later rounds of this draft. So even if the Giants don't take a quarterback at 3 or at 34, some point in this draft, they need to take a rookie quarterback and throw a dart at this damn dartboard. That's how I feel about it. So I totally do agree with you, Brandon. At some point in this draft, it's the right thing to do. It is the right practice. When the Seahawks drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round, they didn't expect to get a franchise quarterback. When the Cowboys drafted Dak Prescott in the 4th, they didn't expect to get a franchise quarterback. The 49ers in the 7th round with Brock Purdy didn't expect to get a franchise quarterback. And the Eagles, even I think in the 2nd round, Jalen Hurts probably viewed him as a developmental project. By year 2, he was starting for them and making Pro Bowls. So all these teams, they throw darts at the board. They find franchise quarterbacks by chance. The Giants don't even throw darts at the board. And that's why they do not have a long-term franchise quarterback. So totally agree with you. Can't keep kicking the can down the road. Got to take a quarterback this year.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest things that we've been criticizing the Giants over the past couple seasons. And hopefully, like I mentioned earlier, they learn from this mistake. They have to start throwing darts at the board, and obviously pun intended, because we like Jackson Dart. But, I do think that when it comes down to it, if they don't do that, if they don't take a shot, there's no way in hell they're walking out of this draft without a quarterback, right? There's just simply no way. The question is, do they like Sanders enough to go 3? Or do they like somebody else enough in the 3rd or 2nd round to take a gamble there, to take a shot? Even if it means trading back up into the 2nd round, you could package those 2 3rd-round picks together and get into the middle of the 2nd round and get a Jalen Milroe or get whoever it is, Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, whatever. The Giants are going to walk away from this class with a quarterback. It's just a matter of, is it someone they have conviction in, or is it someone they feel iffy on, but they like the upside? That's what the real question is here. But yeah, I agree. kicking the can down the road. It should have started. It should have started a long time ago. They should have been adding quarterbacks to see if somebody would pan out. It should never have been UDFA Tommy DeVito. Like, it should have never been him. It should have been a third, fourth, even second round quarterback they thought had potential. So yeah, like, they should be doing that frequently. It's been 6 years. Like, the fact that Daniel Jones stopped us from drafting a quarterback for 6 years is by far one of the most embarrassing things I've seen an organization do in a very, very long time. So I'm happy that we finally turned the page and we can at least start to look to the future. And at least the future seems to be a little bit brighter than what we previously have seen the last couple seasons.
Absolutely. It's definitely on the up and up. And there is one comment here that I want to bring up. Explain to us how Dak Prescott is a franchise quarterback. Dude, the guy's gone to the playoffs nearly every single season of his career. He finished top 5 in MVP voting 2 years ago. And he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He's absolutely viewed as a Dallas Cowboys franchise quarterback. You don't need to win a Super Bowl to be a franchise quarterback. Otherwise, then by that logic, Josh Allen wouldn't even be a franchise quarterback. Lamar Jackson, and these guys are franchise quarterbacks. So Dak is, if you ever thought over the last 6 years that Daniel Jones was a franchise quarterback, yes, Dak Prescott is a franchise quarterback. So last super chat that we're going to get through before we wrap up this stream from Jeff, a real big super chat here. Very generous of you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Jeff saying, if Shedeur is there at 3, that's the dart throw. If we believe this team will be better, we won't be in this position next year. Add to that, where does Hunter and Carter fit? Is Banks a failure? Is Carter better than Kayvon? Yeah, I do think Carter is better than Kayvon. I will just say that. I don't think Deonte Banks is a failure, but I also think the cornerbacks are just by nature injury prone because of the nature of the position. So it's always good to have extra talent and depth there. So I think that Hunter could make sense there. Also, I think Hunter is going to be a star wide receiver for the Giants, which absolutely could be utilized by Russell Wilson playing alongside Malik Neighbors. But listen, if the dart throw is Shedeur Sanders at 3, I will not complain. I think Sanders is a capable quarterback. Yes, it might be a reach, but I've made this argument before. It's the only position that you reach on. It's the only position that you say, hey, maybe I don't have full conviction, but I'd rather bank on what I don't know than what I do, right? You're hoping that you're wrong at that point when you're taking the quarterback at 3, that maybe you're not fully convinced by, because oftentimes a lot of quarterbacks go in the top 3 and everybody says, oh, that's a reach. They shouldn't go there. And then they get selected and they do become franchise quarterbacks. So I wouldn't be upset if Shedeur is the pick at 3. Obviously, I'm enamored by Hunter. I think Carter is an incredible prospect as well. But really, this is why I keep saying at number 3 overall, it's going to be really hard for the Giants to mess this one up. They mess everything up seemingly over the last 6 years. But right here at number 3 overall, they got 3 selections that I'll be happy by. I should not be feeling like they messed it up on Thursday night of the draft. I think that this is like easy. They could sleepwalk their way to a good pick here.
Yeah, like, you either end up with Carter, Sanders, or Hunter. Like, it is a good situation to be in. Obviously, we would have preferred the first overall pick, would have been Cam Ward for sure. But now, obviously, we have a little bit of a different path to take. And Jeff, really appreciate the super chat. Really, really generous of you. And listen, if the Giants draft Shedeur Sanders, I'm going to root for the guy because I'm a Giants fan. That will never change. Do I think it's the right pick? Debatable. Obviously I have my qualms and my red flags about Sanders as a player. I don't think his arm strength is anything that exciting. I think that, he's a bit slow at times, but nonetheless, I do think if the Giants want to take a shot on that and he ends up being great, I will be super happy and I will eat my words and I will admit that, no problem. I have no problem saying I'm wrong, because the point being is, like, I just hope I'm wrong. If the Giants take Sanders, I hope I am so freaking wrong that I have to, eat crow on that a couple years down the line. That's the most important thing to me, is that the Giants are good. My opinion is obviously based on many different variables, many different factors. I just have my opinion about Sanders for, many different reasons watching him over the course of this offseason. But will I be upset? No. Will I be skeptical? Yes, because I'm not sure he's the right selection, but I'm going to root for the guy. No freaking doubt about it. And when it comes to Hunter or Carter, Hunter, obviously, I think he should be a receiver next to Neighbors. I think the Giants would have 2 of the most dynamic, young, cost-controlled receivers in the sport. You don't get that very often. And then on top of it, Carter, he's better than Kayvon. Carter is not stopping me from drafting. Kayvon's not stopping me from drafting Abdul Carter, who could truly be an all-pro level pass rusher and can really open up your entire defense. And we are going to take a look at Kyle McCord. A lot of people keep telling us to take a look at Kyle McCord, and I think that, Anthony, it might just be time to bend the knee and do it, because everyone says he's great. I haven't watched that much of him, but I am curious now to see what he can do. Obviously, Syracuse not going up against the best opponents in the world, but nonetheless, neither is Sanders. So people love him. So let's go take a look at Kyle McCord and see what he can do on the film.
You had to get that shot in there at Shedeur. Shedeur faced better competition than Cam Ward. I will say this so many freaking times. He faced better competition than Cam Ward. Shedeur is a baller. I really do like him. And I'm excited because as we get even closer to the draft, Alex, we're under 3 weeks away. I know we're going to have to set it up one episode live between now and the draft where we just debate each other on Shedeur Sanders. You and I are going to have to go at it. It's going to be like a Royal Rumble. It's going to be a sparring boxing match. It's going to be
did it in person. We just absolutely whack each other.
Yeah, right. Like I don't like a point that you made. I've got a boxing glove on. Boom, boom.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Absolutely. And also,
right,
anyway, we have to do a full mock draft too. We have to do a whole full 7-round mock. We have a lot of stuff to get through over the next couple of
Last year, we did the 20K special. We hit it like right in front of the draft, which was fantastic. So we had all these different special guests on, and we did that big mock draft special. We're creeping up on 25K. I don't know if we're going to get there between now and the draft, but hey, we'll definitely have something special planned if we get to 25K before the draft. So tell all of your friends to subscribe to Fireside Giants. And if you're watching right now and you haven't subscribed, what are you doing, man? Subscribing is free. Costs you nothing. Might as well smash that subscription button and subscribe to Fireside Giants because, yeah, we've got, as Alex was saying yesterday, we have some plans for giveaways for members and for everybody else in the chat. We're making some stickers right now, which we're excited to present and send out to all of you. So we've got a lot of cool stuff planned. Make sure that you're subscribing to the channel. And yeah, we're definitely going to have some sort of a special mock draft episode planned for the upcoming draft. And Josh, just to answer your question, we have collaborated with other content creators in the past, and we absolutely will collab with other content creators in the future. Diggy and I have done a lot of them in the past. Yeah, we've had a lot of guys on before, so we will have more on. And I think especially with the draft right around the corner, that mock draft special, there's a very good chance that we will be collaborating with some people for that mock draft special.
Yeah, also it's sometimes just scheduling. Anthony and I are just like, all right, let's hop on and stream at any given time. And today we were literally like, let's do a stream today. And there was like 12, and I was like, no, let's do 2. And then we just like, let's do 11. So, sometimes all the other content creators are doing their own thing and they have their own schedule. So we have to like kind of do it in advance. But as we get approaching, really get closer to the draft here, maybe we'll bring on some of the Giants Collective guys, Anthony, into a live stream, whether it be the Entertainer and, Bad Dog. We'll see if they're available. And I know you guys like them too. So, always happy to do some collaborative stuff on the channel and, get more people in the community. And obviously would love to get their opinions too, because this is a very loaded situation with the players available at 3 and everyone has their own take on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I will just use this to remind everybody, I am part of the Giants Collective with Bad Dog, The Entertainer, and NYG Fangirl. We do a twice a week show now, Wednesdays and Friday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we talk Giants all together on a collective panel. So that is my way of collaborating with all of the creators all the time. So make sure you all are tuning in to that as well. But yeah, subscribe to Fireside Giants. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this live stream. Again, ring the bell so you don't miss any of our live streams. Comment your thoughts down below if you're watching the replay to this live stream. Of course, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.